and it looks like we're gonna be going to a quick break. So we will go, yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. That was such an incredible game one to kick off the day. Casanova, thank you so much for bringing us through that first match. We're going to say goodbye to you for now, and we're going to welcome in Swim to the broadcast. So, good morning to you, Swim. How are you doing on this fine morning?
I am so incredibly excited to cast these games. These are the craziest games. The end of all of these games in this tournament are insanely close. This is the best Runeterra metagame ever. Literally, it's crazy to see like all these decks and all this diversity and so much balance. Like these games are all just like coming down to the wire, and I can't wait to get into today's games.
And I don't expect anything different for Worlds. It's the biggest stage, it's the best players, and they've brought the best decks.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Amy, I know you're really excited about this next match, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you take it away to start talking about it.
Oh my gosh, I am so actually very excited here because it's Szychu versus Kevin, and I don't know if you guys have seen me like tweet spamming about Szychu's lists all morning. I like tweet, delete, because I'm just so excited for Feel the Rush, Draven Kate Ezreal, and then the spicy pick, Zoe Heimerdinger, and Kevin also coming in with Sivir, Demacia, Lulu, Poppy, Vandal City, and a Plunder deck. So, Swim, you want to talk us through Szychu's decks?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really spicy one. As mentioned, Szychu's bringing Feel the Rush, like basically effective like Shadow Owls for your control, which is, you know, a very old deck, and it's probably going to be like a meta call against a lot of like the Caitlyn Draven players or like Ezreal Draven, which is a great call. We're seeing Draven dominating this metagame in the tournament. It's getting banned every time, but we look over at Kevin's lineup and there's not a Draven deck to be seen. So a bit of a miss for Szychu here, but Kevin, a pretty standard lineup with you know, Akshan Sivir, the spicy one of Feel the Rush in the Plunder, the good old South American technology, and then of course the Lulu Poppy Bandle Rally.
Yeah, you know that Kevin is repping Brazil in style here. These are three fantastic decks. And you've got the beats coming from Sivir and Akshan. You've got that very nice elusive aggro coming in with Poppy and Lulu. But then the Plunder deck. You have these two champs that just love it when you're dealing little bits of incremental damage on your opponent. And the deck hasn't changed that much, but it is still phenomenal. Now, Szychu has the very odd one out deck here.
Szychu...
So... What's with the Zoe Dinger deck?
The Zoe Heimerdinger deck is going to be absolutely crazy. Szychu is known as, one of the most innovative people on the European ladder, and it shows with this lineup. It is actually a really, really great targeted lineup. It's a lot. It uses some odd looking decks for sure, but it does a really, really good job at beating out, hard targeting these Draven decks that he expected to see. And I think that's actually a really great call, but just a little bit unlucky going lineup to lineup here. And that's one of the things about Worlds, Amy, because all of these different decks, all of these different regions, these players, these playstyles, these different metagames even are coming together in this one big pot. And what that's going to mean is it's kind of hard to do these like narrow, precise targeting strategies because a lot of different players have different ways that they think the meta is going to be working in different regions.
Yeah, there's a very massive variety of deck lists coming this weekend.
Yeah.
And already we've seen very few repeat decks other than maybe the top three. You've got the Draven decks that are paired with either Caitlyn or Ezreal. You've got the Scion discard decks, and you've got Zoe and Nami. Those are like the big decks, but everything else is a bit of a toss-up. And I also want to say that Alan, last round, not getting the win, really a little disappointing for our Polish players, but Szychu able to maybe pick up a win here against Kevin. Let's see how it goes. So they've locked in their bans. It looks like Sivir Akshan banned for Kevin, and it's Draven.
Yeah,
Caitlyn
honestly,
Ezreal banned.
I wasn't even going to try to predict these bans because Szychu's lineup is so irregular. The thing is, if you're Kevin right now and you're sitting at this lineup, like the thing to understand about bans and lineups that's so important is that to play a deck well in Runeterra at a tournament level, you have to know all of the different matchups. You need to play your deck, not just as a deck, but you need to know your different win conditions in all of the different opposing matchups in like the dozens of different decks you could be against. And when you're Kevin right now and you're staring down, Feel the Rush Control and Bandle, Targon, Heimerdinger, I mean, you're not really sure how you feel about those decks, right? Because they're not decks people commonly play. And I think he just went for kind of like the comfort ban. He knows that he doesn't really want to play against Draven, but it's always a little bit spooky going into decks that you don't really know how to play against. That's the surprise factor.
Oh, yeah. Tribeam is an incredibly strong deck, and it's hard to play against, especially because you have to deal with kind of the randomness, the tracking of the Tribeams themselves. But when you're going against kind of an old classic here, the Trundle Tryndamere Feel the Rush, you might have like somewhere back in your brain like, oh, I know how to play this. And then you have the Zoe Heimerdinger deck, which I still can't get over. This deck, I played it myself. It's really good at making 2/1s with tough. Those are the turrets that get generated most often just based off the cost of the spells in the list. But it looks like our first match is going to be Lulu Poppy versus Trundle Trynd.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing about just like these decks that other people won't know how to play against because these players have practiced, they've scrimmed against dozens of different matchups across all of their different decks. But when you bring a deck that they're not used to playing, they will play that matchup wrong. They're going to mulligan wrong, and that's going to be a huge amount of favor. So Szychu, conventionally speaking, is going to be unfavored lineup to lineup here. It's going to be, Kevin's matchup, but the surprise factor could come in big.
And I like Szychu here with the Feel the Rush already in hand. I have a feeling that it's going to be discarded.
Yep. And we
There's
have
almost
here
definitely going to be at least one aloof coming down before turn 9 or 10.
A really, really nasty start by Szychu, and I love what Kevin just did there. He's looking at his hand. He had the option for a Ranger's Resolve, but not, and even though he has a second one, he knows that in this matchup, the Ranger's Resolve is going to be getting a crazy amount of value, and he can't just throw it away like that. He can just play the other Lulu from hand and just start dealing in this chip damage. Now, the pressure's on Szychu to respond to this. Szychu is basically just trying to wait it out, trying to stall the game, remove the board, and eventually get to the Feel the Rush win condition.
Yeah, this deck is probably the most board wipes you will see in a single deck or in a single day, because Szychu is running wide damage. On almost every turn, there's the potential for things like Blighted Ravines and Avalanches and the box.
Yep.
And of course, the one high-end Ruination, which you see in hand right there.
I really want to talk about that because that draw, he just drew Ruination last turn, and that swings this matchup like crazy, Amy. Szychu was pretty unfavored, but when you look at the deck list, there's only one Ruination in it, and that's going to be something that, I mean, Kevin's going to have a really hard time playing around with his deck. He's not really favoring his units right now, and these Ranger's Resolves might actually start getting... Szychu's setting up for the Ruination. If he banks 3 spell mana, he can do it next turn into Kevin's development, and that's huge. A good Ruination will win this game on the spot.
Yeah, and that means that the Tavern Keeper can still come down, heal face, maybe get in a swing, and then set up for the Ruination.
Absolutely. Could play the Sentry as well, depending on whether he favors the draw, but this is actually an excellent spot for Szychu. Also, the fact that Ruination is a one-of in this list, it's the one-of meta, right? It's really hard to play around one-ofs, and Kevin, you know, he knows it's in the list. He knows it's open deck list, and you're always playing around what the opponent has, but how do you stare down this Ruination and think, oh man, I can't develop here. He might have this one-of in his hand. You don't, and he might get blown out by it next turn.
I think that Kevin has to play by the philosophy of make him have it, but it looks like the mini board wipe, because everything right now does have 2 health, is going to work out just okay. This Ranger's Resolve gonna shut it down hard, but it does mean the Withering Wail can follow up.
Well, the thing that's really important here is that the second Range Resolve could be a punish to the Withering Wail. This line leaves Szychu a little bit risky. I mean, he can't see in the hand. I think this play is really, really solid, but the Ranger's Resolves are actually going to be getting some really, really impactful value here. Oh, and the Kelp Maiden, too, is disgusting.
Kelp Maiden, yep, with the rally. Really getting a lot of damage for Kevin this turn, and here's the Withering Wail, but it's going to get halted by the Burst Speed Tough Ranger's Resolve, shutting it
so
down.
Nasty.
This just became a spell that gains 3 life.
Yep, and not only that, but we can see the Relentless Pursuit in Kevin's hand right now. So this is 6 damage going to Nexus, putting Szychu down to 10. We can do it again, putting down to a threaten of 2 with the Kelp Maidens if we want to. By Kevin, not looking that good for Szychu. He needs to set up a Ruination probably on his turn now. He doesn't have the ability to Ruinate on Kevin's next attack because he knows that Kevin will open attack on the turn 8 attack. So Szychu's gotta use it on his offense turn, which is not where you want to be as a control player.
And also where you don't want to be is at 2. So Szychu getting out the Tavern Keeper as a blocker, healing up 3 on the Nexus. Everything here does have quick attack, not that it matters so much when the Tavern Keeper is a 3/3.
Yep.
But
this prank off the Kelp Maidens could be huge. Kevin,
damage.
with the Kelp Maidens, you don't usually see. Let's see what this prank hits. If it hits the... Oh, it's the 2 sentries. It's not doing anything.
Oh my god, that was so nerve-wracking, because those 2 high-cost spells, if you add 2 mana to the cost of field, it becomes the deadest card in the existence of the game.
Exactly.
Impossible to cast.
The prank won't let you increase the mana beyond 13, but if it hit Ruination, that would have been really scary. Not just, you know, for the mana cost, although that would have been a big deal, but also for the information, even at those mana points.
No, hitting the double sentry there just kind of feels good for Szychu, because it means that the cards in hand, the important ones haven't been revealed, and the important ones haven't been hit. So Szychu going to swing in here. Trundle now on the board, and an Ice Pillar in hand.
Yep.
Will our
and
Troll
Szychu's
King
looking dominant.
get through?
For the most part, Szychu's health may be low, but Kevin's hand is pretty much out of resources. The Cataclysm is doing very, very little here on this kind of board state.
No, there's none of these that you really want to swing into. But there is the...
That's a good draw, but it's going to get hit by a box here, as Szychu has the perfect counter to that. He knows he doesn't even have to play it now. Ice Pillar will level up the Trundle. And Szychu is in a dominating position.
The box is going to get some good selective hits here. You have a lot of things attacking, but the box is going to kill the 2 that we're going to get the unavoidable damage.
Yep, we've got the Vile Feast on the Kelp Maidens. Now, if you're Szychu right now and you're hand tracking, and of course, every player in this tournament is going to be hand tracking, you actually know for a fact that the card, you can see one card in Kevin's hand, and you know he got it off of the Concologist. So you know for a fact that it's, you know, a random card, and you're thinking, God, what could I lose to here? And the answer is, I mean, not much. You are in such a good position here.
And there's another Cavern Keeper. That's a good hit for you off the draw. And this Trundle's just going to keep on growing the longer it stays on the board, especially with these 2 cards in hand.
Yeah, and with Kevin being out of resources, he needs to hit a hidden pathways here to be able to replenish. Otherwise, he has nothing. The pursuit is a complete brick, and I think that's just
that's
it.
Nothing. You can't swing your 2 1s into this board.
There it is.
And Szychu getting the win in this first match.
That was a very, very fast game of control, and now Szychu's gonna have to win with the Zoe Heimerdinger Targon Bandle City Spice.
I'm so excited about this deck list, and I want to say that this deck actually has something very important for this match. So there's going to be up to 2 games here. I'm unsure what Kevin will bring. Typically, you don't switch your list going into the next game unless you feel that you have a definitely favored matchup. But this Zoe Heimerdinger list is running a card you don't really see very often. It's called Sunburst. Sunburst deals 6 and silences if it's a Daybreak, meaning the first card you cast in the turn. And that ruins both the Gangplank and the Sejuani.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty crazy tech card here. Again, Szychu's lineup, the whole point of this lineup is to hard target Draven decks, which is cool. I mean, we saw people targeting Zoe Nami, and then we saw that not really working out that well because Nami is a really hard deck to target. But he took that Draven Caitlyn deck and he said, you know what? I'm going to starve this out of resources. Sunburst is here because it's so good against the Lost Soul Twin Blade Revenant. It shuts that down completely. It happens to do well against other decks, and that's why he's running it. It's doing well against stuff like Plunder, like you said.
Let's get
This
start
might be a
with a
5-head lineup by Szychu.
Did you see that Hydrovine too? There was the potential to get a Hydrovine in hand and just be like, this is my new win con.
You considered it for a split second there.
Loping Telescope can just be like, I'm a Hydrovine deck now, actually. Don't mind me.
Alright, now it's up to Szychu to find a way to stabilize this, but Kevin has a really, really good hand here. And when you get to Bandle City Mirrors, the player drawing the Mayor without the other player having the Mayor is a pretty big advantage. We can see Kevin having a fully discounted hand, and Szychu, I mean, he could answer it if he really wants to use a Buster Shot, but that's a huge trade down. At this point, you're gonna be kind of at the mercy of these Yordles just swarming the board. I mean, we're gonna have a really scary attack in 2 turns with Kevin.
Yeah, the Bandle City Mayor is really a leader of his people. These Yordles, getting the reduction of cost means that you can kind of just spit out a dozen of them, fill up the board, and keep on doing it, especially because he adds one into hand. But we are going to see the shot, the full cost shot on the Mayor. R.I.P.
Wow.
Mayor, you served your people well.
I think that's a very, very bold play by Szychu, especially because, you know, stuff like Sharp Sight was an option there, but making sure he called it, and the Bandle City Mayor goes down. Those discounts, because if we can see Kevin's hand, look at that. Look at how disgusting this hand would be if those discounts had stayed on the board. That would have been disastrous for Szychu.
Now Szychu has one good unit which could come out here. Don't really want to use that Hawk unless you really need to stun something, but if there isn't an open attack next turn, the Hawk could stun Poppy to prevent damage from coming through, and Poppy from buffing any other things on the board.
The really nice thing about Szychu's position here, and he does have to Fangs, Serpent's not bad. He could even go for another Crescent. That might be a little crazy with the Sunhawk already. But the really nice thing about Szychu's position here is that he has multiple slow speed stuns, the Crescent Strike and the Sunhawk. So if Kevin has to develop into his attacks instead of open attacking, well, then Szychu can shut that down. And we can see Kevin's board, you know, Poppy with no supporting cards. That is going to have to play into these Crescent Strike and Sunhawk.
We see the pass back here with the Fangs just chilling on the board, getting ready to steal a little bit of life. And here's Fleet Feather Tracker, which opens Szychu up for the stun.
Szychu's long-term position, not so well. I mean, he can slow down Kevin's attacks. He can make them skip a couple of attacks. But if you look at Kevin's hand, it is not running out of steam. We've got hidden pathways, we've got generation, and Szychu doesn't really have a way of dealing with these units directly. Not looking good for the Bandelheimer deck here.
And here comes Pokey Stick.
Yep, and the
Stick is
will...
able to take out the birdie.
Yep, no spells. That is good for Szychu at least, but I mean, these attacks are going to start getting scary, and Szychu doesn't really have any blockers to this. He will have to damage the Lulu just to try to set it into kill range for his Serpent next turn.
And the Serpent, thankfully, will be able to come in, but if there's a chance for that focus speed shield,
The shield.
could be what saves the Lulu. So here's the Serpent, and now that it's been shown, we are going to see the tiny shield on Lulu, so she will not die to a challenge there.
And I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Szychu's just trying to win the resource game. Right now, if you look at this kind of like hand state and what's happening here, Szychu's biggest problem is not having enough draw, but the Aloof Travelers is great. This will discard the second Poppy from the hand and draw Szychu a card. And if Szychu can start owning the board and just winning this card generation game, then he does have the ability to come back here. All right, Szychu's just trying to keep this board as narrow as possible, of course, because he doesn't want to keep buff targets alive. He knows if he just kills everything small, then the Lulu and the Poppy aren't at least doing that much. He has a Mayor. This Mayor needs to start getting value.
And here's the Bandle City Mayor with a Kingpin Sled and Bomber Twins. Going for the Bomber Twins there, going for the wide board, fill it up. And there's also a Loping Telescope in hand to get even more generation of random spells.
Ooh, and that's another stun we got off of the Bomber Twins. The Explosive Minefield is going to be another punish if Kevin starts taking any sort of attacks here. This is a really, really interesting position. Kevin having the quick attack Kingpin. Szychu's going to look for a generation chain. He's probably going to go for another Bomber Twins. He can flood the board right now. This is turning around for Szychu.
Off. The Telescope, Hidden Pathways, looking to draw. And something interesting is right now, Kevin actually has the other two copies of Poppy in hand. Those are the Poppy copies that have actually turned into their signature spells, which is an oof for those aloof travelers. Getting those discarded in case the one you have on board is removed is not what you want to see.
We can see Szychu's just playing reactively, keeping his mana up for potential options. He knows he doesn't need the Bombers as a blocker this turn. The Cytheria off the top is going to be huge for Kevin because now these attacks are going to threaten a lot. The Crescent Strike will come down by Szychu, and that will pretty much lock out this entire attack. But it could be the Explosive Minefield.
And Kevin
This is very big all of a sudden because now it's just a quick attack.
Just a quick attack coming through. Lulu doesn't want to swing, she would just die. But I want to say that this deck has 3 copies of Cytheria the Bold. In the qualifier rounds, Kevin was running a very similar deck that only had 2 copies of Cytheria. I think he was really happy with how well she performed. You don't see a lot of decks actually running her. And I agree, giving everything fearsome can do a lot here. Make it so your opponents just can't block effectively.
Ooh, this is actually maybe a big bad draw for Szychu because Kevin picks up a Relentless Pursuit off of the Aloof Travelers, and that's a really, really big deal here because Kevin's just in a position, he's got units. Szychu's biggest vulnerability is he doesn't really have big ways of deleting units, and multiple rallies is going to do a really, really good job of closing the game out because Szychu does have the more cards.
He just got a way to remove the biggest thing on the board, though. Cytheria the Bold might be Cytheria the Bursted with the Sunburst.
Yep, and he does have the ability to kill it here. If it's Daybreak, then there's no amount of Sharp Sight that could save anything. He's debating about whether killing the Poppy or the Cytheria. Now, he knows that the second Poppy got discarded off of his Aloof Travelers because you can see what got discarded.
And what are the chances there's 3 of them?
If he might be about to get punished by the third Poppy. If he goes for the Poppy here, there's just going to be another one. You can't play around the third Poppy.
You can't. You cannot expect them to have drawn the third one. I know we talk a lot about like having to play around the 1-ofs in somebody's decks, but playing around the 3-ofs, it's just like you're trying to do the calculations quickly in your head. Okay, what is the probability that they have gotten this. We've seen 2 copies out of 3. There's still, 20-something cards left in the deck. What are the chances?
It's usually pretty low. In these cases, you can estimate like 8 to 10%. And I mean, he might be going for it. This a lot actually rides on this, because if he goes for the Poppy now and Kevin just plays the 3rd Poppy, if Szychu doesn't play around that 10% chance from his perspective of the 3rd Poppy being in hand, he gets punished. But he goes for the Cythria. That's so huge.
Hitting the Cythria is great here because with that rally, the turnaround swing was going to be huge. No!
Whoa! Wait a second.
Wait.
Did Kevin just play into the silence? Look at Szychu's face. The daybreak from the sunburst. This is the surprise value I was talking about. Kevin didn't realize the silence was there, and he wasted a sharp sight.
This is one of those cards that I mentioned before. You don't see it very
Nobody
often.
believes it. Exactly.
I played so many expeditions, and it's one of those cards that you take because removal is so premium. And in an expedition, it's not a bad card. It's not a good card. You take it because you need to. But here it was a game changer, just big enough to take out Cythria, baited out the trick because nobody remembers that it silences before the damage if it's the first spell in the turn.
Right, that's that surprise value. Now, the onus is on Szychu to figure out how he wants to play this. He stuns the Poppy outright. He's very worried about a Ranger's Resolve. Otherwise, he would take the block on the Poppy with a Pale Cascade.
And I think Szychu's very effectively cluttered up the board, that Mayor doing some work, and gets to swing in here. Because the Poppy's not able to buff up the board by turning it around, probably don't want to sacrifice your Lulu either. Szychu has a definite advantage here.
Exactly.
And
Szychu is in a dominating
really
position.
it came down to that read.
Yeah, that
was a
Sunburst
good
was
read.
absolutely huge. I think a lot of players might think that the odds of the 3rd copy are lower, but when the first 2 copies are givens, the odds is actually a lot higher than you would expect.
And look at that, it's Heimerdinger. Hey, Heimerdinger.
One of the really adorable things about Szychu's build here, the Targon Vandal Heimer, is you can play Heimer on turn 4. If you curve the Mayor into the Heimer on turn 4, you can actually start generating turrets really, really quickly. Now, that didn't happen this game, but hopefully we'll see more of this deck as the tournament progresses.
And as I mentioned before, if the Heimerdinger does hit the board, his specialty in this deck is making 2/1s. You may notice that there are 3 2-cost spells in the hand, which makes for a really good way to just repeatedly block anything that's not elusive. Also, they have tough, not that it's usually relevant.
And Szychu has all but won the game at this point. We can see he's got all the resources. He's managed to stabilize. His deck always had the late game. We can look at Kevin's hand and it's just out of steam. We have answers to everything. And I mean, Kevin just has these bricked copies of his champions that Szychu's not playing into. There's the second Lulu we see as well.
Gonna lock in the blocks. Trying to decide between maybe getting a bit more damage, sacrificing the Mayor versus not. Now that Mayor's already really done his job. There's only 1 more unit in hand.
Yeah, and I mean, I completely agree with what you said earlier, Amy. This game did completely come down to that Sunburst choosing on the Cythria, making sure that he goes for the scarier card, goes for the option that doesn't get him punished. European players tend to be a lot more careful. That's one of the things that we'll notice when we see these tournaments and watch these different regions. The playstyles are going to be a little different. You know, players like Szychu and Alan are constantly just playing around everything, even like low odds stuff, whereas a lot of American players are just kind of like, they look at something that's low odds and they're just ship it. They're like, yeah, if it happens, it happens, right? But in this case, paying off for
Sometimes you just gotta
Szychu.
make them have it. Yeah, it's working out. And here is the Poppy taking at this now whimsied squirrel.
Yep, and we do see a scary board. Ooh,
And
the
a
Heimerdinger is going to be a little
rally.
low tempo here. This is very vulnerable to a rally all of a sudden. That's a big deal. This rally is going to do a little too much damage, and the board is going to get wiped. I don't know if Szychu could have played the Heimerdinger there. The pokey stick would have given him a draw and killing off one of the units, but now this unit's going to get healed off of the Lulu. It's going to get buffed off the Poppy. Szychu's realizing his mistake. He's patting, he's like hitting himself in the head. You can see that he's like, oh, I could not have played the Heimer there. That's a disaster.
Yet the Heimerdinger, especially without the ability to follow up with any of those key spells, the removal was able to hit something you already saw on board, and now you've got these impact units huge. You've got Lulu leveled, which means she's bigger, she's healing, she's doing work, and oh no, Heimerdinger as a blocker. You know, he's not very good at blocking.
Yeah, but actually being able to survive this is a big deal. This Heimerdinger being able to just kill the tracker and start basically just trying to stabilize this game as we go down to, what, 1 health here?
Down
1 health
to
off of the impact.
1.
We can heal, and Heimerdinger is going to start spitting out these turrets. Kevin doesn't really have over the top damage except for the impacts. These impacts are going to be crucial. Kevin needs a 3rd rally top deck right now.
That's not rally. So we're going to see
It's a sharp
Poppy
sight.
taken out. Sharp sight in response. She survives the pokey stick, but here comes the first of the 2-1 toughs.
Yeah, and the board is going to get swarmed. There's the Bandle City Mayor. This board is getting ridiculously swarmed. Szychu's never running out of units here. The barrier comes down to the Poppy, protecting her this turn, but probably from nothing. And now it's up to Szychu to just generate a really wide board, make sure blockers are hitting everything. They're going to be chump blockers, but that's good enough if rallies aren't drawn, and we have to heal through the impact. Szychu might still have this.
Might have it, and with the ability to heal up the Nexus from 2 different spells here, also getting good blockers. I can't actually remember what you get off 5. Is it quick attack off 5?
Honestly, I'm gonna be completely honest. They've moved them around a few times. I think the 5-1 is the quick attack. Yeah, because it's the overwhelm after that. Listen, nobody's played Heimer for like a year and a half, but Szychu is representing it in Worlds.
Szychu knows what's up. And I'm gonna double check there. I know that they had swapped it around so 3 would no longer be the elusive, because it was just so easy to get in that elusive damage. But if you're going for a 5 cost spell,
no.
you're getting the quick attack Rocket Blaster.
Kevin top decks a 2nd Tenor of Terror. That's a big deal. That's more impact damage.
That's a very big deal. That is near unstoppable damage if it comes out here before the attack, but it doesn't come out before the attack.
Playing around the Crescent Strike, he knows that Szychu could have a Crescent Strike in hand, and we can see it. He called that. So the attack comes through, but Szychu's going to be able to survive this with the sharp sight. Not the sharp sight, the star shaping. Sorry, the double S is just, oh, they always get me, you know? The star shaping is going to come out, heal the face, and I don't know if Szychu's going to be able to lose this anymore. That's
And
so
those
huge.
are some pretty big picks right there. How many things are going to have 3 or less power? Not too many. May as well grab this. Take out 2. And
He's
the
just going
second
for another
star
one.
shaping. And oh my gosh,
Another
the
free
Great
quick attack.
Beyond.
And he knows as long as he's not dying here, he has to be good. Heimer's done his job. It's a good Heimer. Heimer can rest in peace now, knowing that he's populated this build and given all these Celestials value. And Szychu is just outgrinding this game, outvaluing. And this is actually looking pretty good.
The 5-1 quick attack, the second 5-1 quick attack, still bringing out the telescope, getting, oh my god, Tiana too. That would just be kind of sick in the future, but I don't think wide enough. Gotta go for these small, cheap units, clog up the board. And by the way,
Or you could go for the elusive win with the Great Beyond.
Since we have
Great
the
Beyond is
Poppy
going
level,
for it. That's it. He can take off the spell shield with health picks. The Whimsy off the top will actually stop this Great Beyond. Wait, that's huge. Oh no. Oh no. Because now Kevin can have enough to win. The Whimsy punish. He drew the 3rd Lulu and Szychu didn't play around it. Oh my god.
You never expect the Whimsy. People don't put it in the deck, but when you draw your 2nd Lulu, she's a pretty useful spell.
This is absolutely nuts. But we see Kevin taking a really, really defensive block. He didn't probably need to block this last quick attack, but he is going to lose a couple of units on this. That's going to be huge. Kevin's down to 4-unit board. Szychu can play a blocker. He has the ball. This game is still on.
Yeah, these units are already impacting. They're going to get more impact. They're getting buffed by both Lulu and Poppy. You've got the help pick and a rally.
The rally, there's no way anymore.
There's no
the rally's just too good.
There's no way to stop this, because with this rally, you've got the barrier on Poppy coming through. You have a guaranteed, is that 10 damage just from the impacts?
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous.
11
I mean, he
damage.
would have needed to, even without the rally top deck, another star shaping to be able to survive here, but that is just too much. And we're going to see Szychu drop a game to the leveled Lulu, leveled Poppy from Kevin. That was a super close one.
Yeah, you can never, ever, ever have a leveled Poppy and live. It's one of those things that once she's up there, you cannot take her down. So we're going to go to game 3. We're going to see the Heimer Zoe lineup again, but this time up against the Plunder build.
Yeah, and this is one that, again, I mean, normally I pride myself on being very confident in like my matchup table knowledge, but I can't really predict how this Heimer Bandle deck is going to do. This deck is so out of left field. I don't know how it's going to match into Plunder.
All right, so I want you to go based off your feelings then. Which do you like more? If you could take one of these out to dinner, you know, sit it down, have a good talk, which would it be?
The Plunder should be favorable, but it's going to be close. A lot of it comes down this matchup to the ability to just have the early like Bandle City Mayor and Telescope.
Well, that is a very good quick hand for Kevin. And then Szychu with the turn 1 Zoe potential, but Zoe dies to quite a few spells in the Plunder deck.
Yep, and Szychu's gonna have to mulligan fairly deep here. Yep, he knows he needs early stabilizers. The Sunhawk is gonna be pretty big here, though.
There we go, turn 1 Zoe. Is she going to die to a Make It Rain next turn? She might.
Yep,
I know
we
I would be
do
just
have the
tempted to
Sunblessed
steal.
Vigor to keep her alive.
Oh, I've never met anyone like you.
And Mirai Warning finding some Dragon Chow.
Yeah, you always love pulling out the 0-3s with Warden.
Do you like the swing with the 0-3? It's like, well, it's gonna... It's not gonna die here
It's not
anyway.
gonna die. It's completely safe. Szychu's drawn the
triggers the
second
Corsair.
Sunburst. I think it might go down exactly like you called it. I mean, if the Gangplank and the Sejuani come down as threats, Sunburst does a pretty good job of being able to start cleaning them up. But if they're leveled, then story.
Here comes the Make It Rain. It's going to be bodied by the shield.
Yeah, and I think if you're Szychu, keeping Zoe alive is just too important, especially because Zoe's level up might actually be one of your win conditions. The thing about Gangplank Sejuani is that deck kind of puts you on a clock to be able to win, and being able to, you know, give a decent sized board some elusive that you might get later off of your random Celestial generation actually does matter.
Oh, it's more than just off of the random Celestial generation. There's actually a secret synergy here. If you cast a Sunburst with a Heimerdinger on the board, you get the Sweeper, which is the elusive
one,
turret,
yeah.
which grants the elusive across the board. You gotta be thinking about the turrets as potential units in this match.
God, I gotta say, I'm looking at this Bandle Targon deck, and it's very, very spicy. I would love to see this deck do well. I'm a little bit biased, but I gotta root for the spice.
I'm rooting not just for the spice, but for the streamer who I have just kind of lurked in the chat of for long enough to be like, yeah, this guy rules.
Yeah, Szychu is one of the, just kind of like back in the day, like he was there from the very, very start. I remember him taking down the Duels of Runeterra 4, like one of the very, very early grassroots tournament, ended up taking first, and he's proven himself as one of the top players in the game, especially with his deck construction.
So she was really sitting on a hand of invoke and removal. Very high cost removal though, especially before the board goes wide. That Buster Shot's not going to be doing too much.
Yep, and Kevin's not going to be running out of resources. We're going to start the
But it's time
Plunder
to
chain. There's a
steal!
Hush.
Whoa! It's doing the hush always big because nobody can expect it.
Yep. I don't know if it'll do much against Szychu's deck. Of course, there's no like big buffs or units that you can just like hush down on combat. But I mean, if Szychu can't play around it, then it can always be disruptive. In worst case scenario, it can take down this Zoe. Serpent's huge here. Zoe's gonna just keep generating more attacks, and this is where we see just like the power of Zoe, not just in Zoe Nami decks of course, but represented here as well. Just her ability to generate this value over and over again. I mean, she might just have to get hushed here. Kevin's realizing there's no better hush target in the deck. Get out of here, Zoe. Let's just remove this before it's an actual threat.
You just saw a little shh going on. And now you're going to see the real benefit of our Blackfish as a 2-2.
The nabbed hush that he couldn't possibly have played around, and that's a big deal. Szychu's hand really needed that extra generation that the Zoe was going to provide. I mean, it's got some good removal opportunities, but it doesn't really have proactive plays, and Zoe really needed to stay alive to help that.
And we're actually seeing a little bit more synergy here. The Black Market Merchant still on the board. Again, it did get buffed to being a 2/2, which means that it survived the combat and discounted the card that was nabbed with Yordle Grifter. So now we get to see the Aloof Travelers.
Ooh, that aloof is going to be
cycling
good for
ahead,
Szychu,
but
being able to replace the Sunburst for a very playable Bandle City Mayor.
you don't need the 2 Sunbursts right now. We haven't seen head or tail of GP or Sejuani. So get to just kind of cleanly swing in here.
And at this point, by the time you're going to see them, they are going to be leveled and outside of Sunburst range here. So, I mean, that's a great swap for Szychu. All right, this is where the Mayor and the Aloof are going to have to start coming in clutch for Szychu. The 3rd Sunburst is drawn.
There's plenty of killing left.
I gotta say, it is looking like Kevin's got the upper hand in this situation, and he draws the Field of Rush, the 1-up. That's absolutely huge. Szychu now might lose literally 3 turns from now.
Get to 9 mana. Thank the 3 for spell mana. It could be the Field of Rush. And the Field of Rush here, because I'm pretty sure when it comes out, you're gonna have leveled champions.
Yeah.
It's just going to be unstoppable, overwhelmed damage, which the tiny units that Szychu's generating cannot deal with.
Well, the thing is, Szychu has Sunburst and Hush. So when the Field of Rush hits, he can Sunburst the Gangplank, take off the buff, but it's not going to do enough damage because Gangplank will be leveled to 6. Sunburst only does... Hush, of course, can deal with one of them, but I don't know if it's going to be enough with him being at 10 health.
No. Sunburst does 6. It hits leveled or unleveled GP and Sejuani. It's the perfect size.
It does, yeah, it doesn't kill Sejuani, but he can Hush the Sejuani. The Sunburst actually will be able to take down the Gangplank, and the Hush will be good enough for the Sejuani. He might actually be able to survive this with his hand, but how is he putting enough pressure down?
Not today. My life or theirs.
The Bandle City Mayor swinging alongside the Tenor of Terror and the base of Burden. Aloof Travelers and the Sunhawk just trying to get in damage while they can. Szychu at 10, trying to bring Kevin down to the same standings.
We're going to see a
And
huge Pale
one of my-
Cascade on the Tenor here, keeping it alive.
Keeping it alive and getting even more removal in hand. Very nice. Another Buster Shot. I am very excited about one card, though. Kevin has a Monkey Idol in hand. There are actually 3 of these in a deck. The Shrine of the Silver Monkey. Being able to get those Powder Monkeys out guarantees you the damage every turn. And it's also just such a nice card. And we saw, by the way, right there, a Make It Rain cleanly just dodging, skipping over the Zoe.
All right, Szychu's got to be worried about taking too much damage here. This is a meta where Nexus health matters so much. It's hard to just take this much damage. He does just use the Hush on that. This might prove disastrous, though, as now he might not have an answer for the Field of Rush that could come down 2 turns from now on Kevin's next attack.
Feel the rush when all of your units have exactly 1 toughness. Zoe isn't close to being leveled. We've seen a lot of repeat spells drawn, and
Bounty Ball knows me name.
I think that next turn, is it time to feel the rush?
Yep, it almost certainly has to be. I mean, Kevin is probably going to want to play around things that punish development. So a Field of Rush here into an open attack next turn looks like the play. He's going for it. This is going to pull out a leveled Gangplank and a leveled Sejuani. Szychu is looking at this one of Field of Rush, and that's going to be disastrous for him. He can Sunburst the Gangplank this turn, but he can't Sunburst next turn.
So when you were prepping for Worlds coverage, did you expect to see Feel the Rush?
No, this is both players have Field of Rush in their lineups here. Szychu has it in his other deck, and Szychu's realizing the position that he's in. It's really, really bad. I mean, the Gangplank is going to get taken out by the Sunburst, but he needs another answer. He knows he has to Pale to try to find one.
But now the GP doesn't get taken out by the Sunburst because there's already been spells cast this turn. You can't silence him.
You're out of options if you're Szychu.
Here she comes, the leveled Sejuani, her boar, her steed.
That is
And they're
absolutely
both
crazy.
10 10s with Overwhelm.
And that's the Feel the Rush one of in Plunder. This tech coming out from South America. All of the South American players that I've seen have been swearing by Feel the Rush in Plunder, and this is exactly why. It just takes long grinded games like this and ends it on the spot. Because, I mean, just waiting until after Szychu didn't have the Daybreak on the Sunburst anymore means he can't use it. He knows that Sunbursts are in the deck, and now there's just nothing stopping this open attack. Szychu realizes he's out of options.
And everything is going to be Frostbitten every single time there's a bit of plunder. And it's going to be guaranteed plunder every single turn.
And I don't see a way out of this for Szychu.
Nasty. That's so good. And I do love the one of Feel the Rush. It is the most expensive spell that you can run in a deck, which does mean you risk it getting hit by Aloof Travelers, which is one of the most common cards that you are seeing in this meta. But it survived, it stayed in hand, we got to see the mana up to 9 plus 3 of the spell mana, 12.
Right.
There it goes. But that's gonna have to be at least 2 spells trying to take out the Sejuani, but it's not enough.
Yep, nothing's going to be able to take that down. I mean, even if Szychu top decks a Hush at this point, it's too late. We're going to see this open attack swing, and that's going to be it. Kevin is beating Szychu in the first match. Szychu's lineup actually looked pretty good the way the games went, but got a little unfortunate in game 2 there with Kevin's really, really specific hand being able to stop Szychu from winning that game.
Love to see that Feel the Rush finish. Here comes the Ice Storm, and everything is dead. Swinging in for double lethal. Kevin with the win, taking it home for Brazil.
I gotta say, I'm a big fan, Amy, of all these like different kind of styles of decks, all these different like techs that we're seeing in this tournament. There's so much diversity represented, and even like the micro decisions of builds, right? The Feel the Rush and the Plunder being the perfect example. It's really, really, really paid off in basically all the games we've seen in these tournaments. Even being able to block the Aloof Travelers from hitting one of your Gangplanks or Sejuani is even a benefit.
Yeah, and we're not seeing a great start to the day for these Polish players. First round going to Cello, second round going to Kevin. But we're going to see how it plays out in the rest of the day. And remember, every player does play against every other player in their group.
Which means we have a lot more action to cover. But let's go ahead and pull up those standings just to show you what has happened so far today, as we have had 2 matches, one in Group C and one in Group D. Talo and Kevin leading the charge right now with a win apiece. But there is still so much more action. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing the Zoe Heimerdinger deck again. That was really, really fun to watch, Amy.
I don't see many people banning it unless it happens to really hit their lineup. I'm looking forward to seeing more games with it, and I hope that we get to cover them. I have a chance to maybe cover it later in the day.
Overall, I gotta say, I really warmed up to Szychu's lineup, just like watching how it played out. The biggest thing, and I can't stress this enough, the biggest thing that was unfortunate was just the matchup, right? I mean, we've seen nothing but Draven decks, Draven Caitlyn being one of the most popular versions, and Szychu's lineup actually will do a really, really good job at demolishing most Draven decks, but he just found an opponent that didn't have one.
Well, maybe he'll run into one later on in the group stages, but we're gonna go to a quick break, and when we come back, match number 3.